Welcome back to the deep dive. Our mission here, well, it's pretty straightforward. We take a big pile of dense information, filter out the noise, and basically hand you the cheat sheet you need to get smart fast.
And today, we're not talking about the usual stuff, how to make money, or even really how to invest it optimally.
No, today we're diving into something honestly much more personal and maybe a bit messier. It's the psychology and you could say the art of spending money.
That's a really critical shift, isn't it? You spend time thinking about growing wealth, which, let's face it, is usually framed as this very rational, numbers-driven thing.
Spreadsheets and formulas, yeah.
Exactly. This is the natural follow-up. We're digging into how we actually use wealth. And, spoiler alert, our decisions often have very little to do with what that spreadsheet says is logical.
It's funny, we think money is all math, right? But the sources we looked at make this pretty shocking case that it's almost pure emotion.
That's the core idea, really. The central thesis we pulled is that money is less about the numbers on a page and way more about the stories we tell ourselves, about happiness, success, who we are.
So spending money becomes more like art than science. There's no single right answer, no universal formula for buying happiness.
And if you just step back for a second, the absurdity of how we behave with money is kind of striking. You have people earning incredible amounts, like top 1%, but they're deeply unhappy.
Right, because they're chasing the money itself, but have zero clue how to translate it into actual well-being.
And conversely, you find people with very little income who manage to extract so much joy and value from what they do have. The difference isn't the bank balance. It's understanding themselves, controlling their behavior, managing expectations.
Okay, let's unpack this. There's a story right at the start of our research that just perfectly sets the stage for everything we're talking about today.
Oh, the armchair story. Yeah, that's a good one.
Picture this. You're at a super high-end, invite-only furniture show. 5-star hotel in LA. Our source was working as a valet there.
Just doing his job, parking fancy cars.
And he overhears this wealthy guy talking about a purchase he just made. A single armchair for $21,000.
$21,000 for one chair. I mean, you can imagine the valets were just stunned, right?
Totally. Jaws on the floor, probably. But the rich guy sees the reaction, and he gives this simple but incredibly revealing explanation. Just 5 words.
Boys, this is what you're supposed to do.
This is what you're supposed to do. And that line just hangs there, doesn't it? It hits the core question for this whole deep dive.
Was he buying it because he loved it? Because it was comfortable, useful? Or was it just checking a box, doing what society told him someone like him is supposed to do to show off?
Exactly. So our mission today is basically to find those hidden psychological levers, the things that make the link between money and actual happiness so incredibly complicated, especially when we get tangled up in confusing status symbols with, real satisfaction.
Right. So to even begin understanding why people spend money the way they do, whether it's you, your neighbor, or some billionaire buying a crazy armchair, you absolutely have to look at their life experiences. What shaped those habits?
There's this principle, it's used a lot in the foster care system, apparently, but it applies everywhere. It's simple but profound. All behavior makes sense with enough information.
And that's the key, isn't it? All behavior makes sense with enough information. It unlocks this non-judgmental way of thinking about finance.
Because we spend so much energy criticizing how others spend, right? Oh, I'd never buy that. But the sources argue that most arguments about what's worth it are just people with totally different life stories talking past each other.
Absolutely. So the big takeaway here is, try not to make fun of someone's spending habits. They didn't just invent them randomly. They learned them through the messy, specific reality of their own life.
You can even see this playing out on a historical scale. This is where it gets really interesting. Think about the late 1920s in America, the Roaring '20s.
That explosion of, well, frankly, wild spending. But what came right before it?
Devastation, World War I. Then a really nasty recession that hit everyone hard. People were told for years, save, suffer, be uncertain, be frugal.
For almost a decade, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the pendulum swings. There's this columnist, Robert Quillen, who kind of nailed the psychological fallout. He had this headline, something like,
A rich father frequently has a poor son. The reason is that a life of ease is a certain death to ambition as cocaine is to morality. Something like that.
Right, but the spending wasn't just about laziness or ease. It was this almost frantic sprint forward. The historian Frederick Lewis Hallen wrote about it. The country felt psychologically liberated. Like they were violently making up for being held down, suppressed during those grim
It
years.
was revenge spending, not rational, not spreadsheet approved. It was like trying to heal this collective emotional wound through consumption.
Exactly. And that pattern, it's timeless. Past trauma, past experiences, they bubble up in all sorts of financial behaviors, sometimes in completely opposite ways.
Like the example of the successful businessman in the sources.
Yeah.
Grew up really poor, felt constantly looked down upon, snubbed.
Yeah, that feeling of being less than.
So when his daughter is picking a college, what does he tell her? Pick the most expensive school you get into.
For him, that high tuition wasn't just a cost. It was a statement, a social trophy, proof that he'd overcome, that he couldn't be snubbed anymore.
Now, contrast that drive for conspicuous spending with the financial educator, Tiffany Elise. She called it post-traumatic broke syndrome.
Right, she became super successful, financially independent, but she found it physically hard to actually spend the money she now had.
Like this constant low-level fear of ending up back where she started, back in the struggle.
So you have two really successful people, both shaped by childhood poverty, but one overspends to prove something, the other underspends out of lingering fear.
Which shows how pointless it is to argue about the right way to spend money. It completely depends on the story you're living, the narrative you're trying to write or escape.
And tied into this is the whole illusion of common sense financially. What feels normal or obvious to you isn't universal.
Our basic emotional triggers, what brings us joy, what scares us, what makes us feel proud or ashamed, these are learned, shaped by our culture, our environment.
Think about it. A kid growing up in a Manhattan high-rise versus a kid on an Iowa farm. They're going to learn to find joy and therefore value in fundamentally different things. Their common sense about money will be worlds apart.
Psychologist Lisa Feldman Barrett talks about this. Emotions aren't just there, innate. Your brain constructs them based on your social context.
Which perfectly explain the massive differences in financial thinking across different classes, different backgrounds. The sources mention this incredible story. A public defender talking about a client.
Yeah, the client was poor, hungry, and tried to buy food using Monopoly money, like actual board game money.
And the lawyer's explanation was just so simple, so profound. He said, "My clients are Zen masters of the right now."
There is no past. There is no future. He was hungry, and this colorful paper was the only thing in his pocket.
For someone living on the absolute edge, maybe homeless or close to it, their world is that 5-minute window. The future next month, retirement, it's completely abstract. It doesn't exist in a practical way.
So trying to tell that person to skip a meal today to save for retirement 30 years from now, it's like speaking different languages. There's no shared common sense ground.
Okay, so this all boils down to really two key pieces of advice for you listening. First, don't let anyone dictate how you should spend your money. Their advice always comes filtered through their own unique baggage, their traumas, their prides, their context.
It's like that financial advisor Tim Maurer said, personal finance is more personal than it is finance. That really sums it up.
And second, related to that, be really, really careful about judging how other people spend their money.
Because if you're too busy pointing fingers at their irrational choices,
You might just miss the equally irrational, trauma-driven things you're doing with your own money. A healthy approach needs respect for different journeys, and remembering that, yeah, all behavior makes sense if you know the whole story.
Okay, so we've talked about how our past shapes us. Now let's shift gears a bit and look at the external forces, the pressures that kind of manipulate us.
Right, because a huge chunk of our spending isn't actually about needing things or even physical comfort. It's about this deep psychological craving for something else.
Validation, respect.
Exactly. You might think you want a fancier car for the smoother ride, but deep down, what you probably really crave is the respect, the admiration, maybe even the envy of other people.
That's the attention economy, right? But it's not just some newfangled Instagram thing. This goes way back.
Oh, centuries. This is where it gets really interesting. Adam Smith, the Adam Smith of economics, he figured this out way back in 1759 in the theory of moral sentiment.
Now, before Wealth of Nations, even.
Right. He asked this basic question: why do people work so hard to get ridiculously wealthy? Even the lowest paid worker usually has the basic necessities covered: food, shelter.
So what's the point of the extreme wealth?
Smith concluded it wasn't about physical ease or pleasure. The real payoff was psychological. His words were something like, to be observed, to be attended to be taken notice of with sympathy, complacency, and approbation.
Wow. So basically, people are buying attention, not just stuff.
That's the vanity principle right there.
Hmm.
We value the positive attention. Money brings us more than the actual utility of the things we buy.
Okay, but how do we figure out what really matters to us, like intrinsically, not just for show?
There's a simple test for that, the reverse obituary test.
Okay, how does that work?
Imagine you're writing your own ideal obituary right now. What would you genuinely want people to remember about you?
Hmm. Well, probably that I was loved, respected for who I was, maybe that I helped people, was a good partner, a good friend, part of the community.
Exactly. And here's the kicker. Almost nobody puts material possessions in their ideal obituary.
Yeah, you wouldn't write, he had a car with 500 horsepower, or her kitchen had imported marble countertops.
Never. We instinctively know that for the deep, lasting respect, the kind that actually nourishes our soul, that stuff is completely irrelevant.
So that highlights a really key difference between two kinds of pride.
Precisely. There's intrinsic pride, that deep, fulfilling feeling of being genuinely proud of who you are, what you stand for, what you've maybe overcome or achieved through effort.
And then there's the other kind.
Extrinsic pride, sometimes called hubristic pride, that's all about what other people think of you. It's
Yeah.
usually tied directly to status symbols, consumption, showing off.
And chasing that extrinsic kind is like filling up on junk food, isn't it?
Perfect analogy.
Mm.
Gets you that quick hit, that immediate satisfaction, but it's nutritionally empty. It leaves less room, less appetite for the stuff that actually nourishes you. Real connection, family, love, making a difference.
And the studies back this up.
Yeah, consistently. Research shows that people who place a high value on extrinsic pride, on status and image, are statistically more likely to be anxious, depressed, and just chronically dissatisfied.
Which brings us to this concept you mentioned, something that's almost never calculated in the price tag of flashy stuff. Social debt.
Social debt. I love that term too, because it captures the hidden danger perfectly. It's what happens when you're spending influences how people see you, but in unwanted ways.
Like making people envious or resentful or feel like you're just flaunting it.
Exactly, or creating this false sense of entitlement in others. It's this hidden liability that can sneak up and completely overwhelm whatever benefit you thought you were getting from the purchase. It turns pride into a potential risk.
Is there a good example of this?
Oh, the ultimate example has to be the story of Frank Lucas, the infamous drug kingpin from the 70s.
Right, the American gangster guy.
His whole massive heroin empire was built on staying invisible, keeping a super low profile. He was doing incredibly well, precisely because nobody knew who he was. He dressed down, avoided attention.
But eventually the ego takes over, right?
Hubris, yeah. He got this overwhelming urge to show off how successful he was. So he goes to this huge boxing match, Ali versus Frazier, the fight of the century.
And he doesn't just go.
No, he wears this ridiculously flashy chinchilla coat and matching hat. Insanely expensive, impossible to ignore. Strangers wanted photos, the press noticed him. He got all the attention he craved.
But it wasn't just the good kind of attention?
Not at all. The wrong people noticed. Lucas himself wrote about it later. He said something like, "I came to the fight an unknown man. I left that fight a marked man."
Law enforcement suddenly had eyes on him. Who is this guy? Where'd he come from? They started digging.
And that coat, that moment of showing off, directly led to his downfall. Arrest, 70 years in prison. The social debt of that coat was astronomical. It cost him everything.
Wow, so we're talking about a negative return on investment for status. The admiration you buy today actively destroys your security tomorrow. That's a chilling cost.
And it's not just a problem for drug lords. Social debt shows up in everyday life too. Lottery winners suddenly losing all their privacy, besieged by requests.
Or just the self-imposed pressure. Like you buy one nice thing, and suddenly you feel trapped.
Absolutely. That's the spiraling expectation trap. The real cost of buying that impressive $50,000 car isn't just the sticker price.
It's the $50,000 plus.
Plus the $60,000 car you feel psychologically obligated to buy 2 years later, just to maintain that image, to stay in that social ring you bought your way into. The liability isn't static. It compounds.
And the fundamental issue here is that status is just. It's an unwinnable game, isn't it? Because its value comes from scarcity, from exclusion.
If everyone can have it, it's not status anymore. The author C.S. Lewis talked about this brilliantly. Life as this constant striving to get inside the next inner ring.
You break into one circle, feel accepted, and then?
What? You immediately realize it's not enough. Your eyes instantly fixate on the next, even more exclusive ring. It never ends.
Status is always a moving target. What's cool and exclusive today is boring and mainstream tomorrow.
We see it all the time. The source mentioned Yale students who were completely obsessed with the musical Hamilton when it was just on Broadway. Hard to get tickets. Exclusive.
But then,
Once it hit Disney Plus, and everyone could watch it easily, suddenly they weren't talking about it anymore. Found it kind of meh.
not because the show changed, but because it wasn't their exclusive thing anymore. The value wasn't the art, it was the exclusion.
Which leads to the most blunt, but probably the most useful piece of advice about playing the status game.
Which is...
The only way to actually win is to stop playing. Just opt out.
Okay, so if chasing status is this endless, unwinnable, potentially self-destructive game, what's the alternative? What's the path to actual durable happiness with money?
Well, if you strip away all that noise, all the social signaling, the sources boil happiness down to something much simpler. Contentment.
Contentment. And how do they define that?
Fundamentally, it's the gap between what you have and what you want.
Have versus want. Okay.
That gap, that space between your current reality and your expectations, that's everything. If you can shrink that gap, ideally by wanting less, not just by having more.
You find contentment, which makes low expectations sound actually good.
Exactly. Low expectations aren't about pessimism.
Yeah.
They're framed as this enormous, freely available source of psychological wealth. It costs nothing to want less.
There's that famous parable, right? The Mexican fisherman.
Oh yeah, classic. Tells the story perfectly. This driven American businessman visits a small coastal village, sees a local fisherman just chilling, having caught only a few fish, working just a couple of hours.
And the businessman, being a businessman, sees inefficiency.
Right. He tells the fisherman, hey, you should work all day, catch more fish, buy more boats, hire people, build an empire. In 10, 15 years, you could sell it and retire rich.
And the fisherman asks the obvious question.
Okay, and what would I do then in retirement?
And the businessman says,
Oh, well, then you could sleep late, play with your kids, hang out with your wife, take siestas, maybe stroll into the village in the evenings, sip wine, play guitar with your amigos.
the punchline being,
That's exactly what the fisherman was already doing. The businessman was prescribing a decade of intense stress and risk to achieve the contentment the fisherman already possessed simply because his wants were low.
wow. Now contrast that kind of built-in contentment with, well, the unhappiest rich people.
Yeah, former President Nixon apparently observed this. Some of the wealthiest people he knew were just profoundly miserable. His description was something like drinking too much, talking too much, thinking too little, retired, no purpose.
They have everything, materially, but they still want more or something different. So that gap between have and want stays wide open, breeding dissatisfaction.
Now compare that to the source's grandmother-in-law. She lived for decades in retirement on just a tiny Social Security check. Very little money. She had almost nothing, but she genuinely wanted even less. Her expectations were incredibly low. And that, the source says, gave her this enormous sense of psychological wealth, a piece that billionaires he knew could only dream of.
Financially poor, but psychologically rich, because she won the want battle.
Precisely. And the other key ingredient for happiness, besides contentment, is contrast.
Contrast, how so?
The actual feeling of happiness, that jolt of joy, it mostly comes from the change in circumstances, the relief, not necessarily the absolute level of luxury you're living
I
at.
think the best drink you'll ever have is plain tap water when you're absolutely dying of thirst.
Exactly. Or the most blissful sleep comes after utter exhaustion. It's the contrast that delivers the powerful feeling.
The story of Shackleton's crew illustrates this incredibly well, doesn't it?
Oh, powerfully. After their ship, the Endurance, was crushed by ice, they survived for, 19 months?
Yeah, nearly 2 years. Constantly freezing, soaking wet, starving, sleep-deprived, stuck in Antarctica. Just unimaginable hardship, pushing human limits.
So when they finally reached that whaling station, got rescued, imagine the sheer overwhelming joy they felt.
They were brought inside, into warmth, given a long, hot bath, a huge hot meal, a clean, warm bed.
Can you even conceive of the intensity of that pleasure? It might have been one of the most purely joyous moments anyone on Earth has ever experienced. Not because the bed was fancy, but because the contrast with the previous 19 months of agony was so immense.
It wasn't just a bath, it was salvation delivering this neurological peak that someone living in constant luxury could never, ever feel.
And that is how we fight the hedonic treadmill.
That tendency we have to get used to nice things really fast until they feel normal and boring.
Exactly. Contentment, fueled by contrast, is the weapon against it. If you choose to live a simpler, financially secure life most of the time, then occasional treats. They feel amazing. They generate far more actual joy than perpetual baseline luxury.
Like the billionaire with the private chef eating his third gourmet meal of the day. He probably gets less visceral pleasure than a kid getting a surprise Happy Meal.
It's all about the contrast. The wealthy person has no low point to bounce back from. The pleasure baseline is already maxed out and therefore flat.
So the sources argue that living simply isn't really about depriving yourself.
Counterintuitively, it's the most potent way to enjoy luxury items. Because when you do indulge, the contrast delivers real magic. You appreciate it more, savor it more. Your money actually buys more happiness per dollar, in a way.
Okay, so all this talk about contentment, status, contrast, it leads us to a really crucial distinction, one that's fundamental for living a rational, happier life with money.
The difference between being rich and being wealthy. These words get used interchangeably all the time, but they mean vastly different things, and they absolutely should not be synonyms.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, so let's define them. Rich is.
Rich is simple. Money in the bank, high income, the ability to buy stuff, to consume.
Unwealthy.
Wealthy is profoundly different. Wealthy means you have control. Control over your time, control over your choices, control over your own life, and even your personality. Wealth is, at its core, autonomy. Independence.
And we see the absolute tragedy of chasing richness over wealth in that Vanderbilt story.
Oh, it's the ultimate cautionary tale. Cornelius Vanderbilt dies, leaves his heirs the equivalent of maybe $300 billion today. Just an insane fortune.
Richest family on earth, basically.
Yet, within 60 years. Almost all gone. They were arguably the richest people imaginable, but spiritually, in terms of control, they became some of the least wealthy.
Because their whole purpose became, what, spending it?
Yeah, spending it faster and more ostentatiously than the next guy, purely to signal their social standing.
Right.
There was this op-ed back then saying socialites devote themselves to pleasure regardless of expense.
But one of the Vanderbilts had a correction.
Yeah, he quipped, actually, they devote themselves to expense regardless of pleasure. They let the money become their master, the measure of their identity. It created this crushing lifestyle debt they couldn't escape. Money owned them.
Now contrast that disaster with someone like Chuck Feeney.
Ah, the duty-free shop's co-founder. An incredible role model for wealth. Makes something like $8 billion. And then chooses to give 99.99% of it away during his lifetime. Lives in a small rented apartment, flies coach into his 90s.
Wow.
He just realized the billionaire lifestyle wasn't for him. Giving the money away, using it to help others, that was his ultimate tool for finding happiness and purpose. He used his massive fortune as a tool, never letting it become a monument to himself or a master dictating his life.
That is the definition of wealthy, using money to buy freedom, not just stuff.
Which means the most valuable thing your money can actually buy isn't an object at all. It's the stuff money buys that isn't material.
Independence.
Independence.
Yeah.
Every single dollar you save that you don't spend. It's buying you a little piece of freedom. Control over your time, your calendar, your choices. That is the absolute highest return on investment you can possibly get.
And you see the value of that control played out dramatically in the lives of athletes sometimes. Like that contrast between Antoine Walker and John Urschel.
Perfect example. Antoine Walker, NBA star, made over $100 million in his career.
But lost control completely.
Totally.
Yeah.
Filed for bankruptcy. Huge entourage, supporting like 30 friends and family. Because he saved nothing, eventually his life decisions, where he lived, what he drove, his basic budget, were being dictated by a bankruptcy judge. Zero autonomy left.
Now, compare him to John Urschel. NFL player, but also a math PhD from MIT.
Right. Despite a huge NFL salary, Urschel lived super modestly. Famous for driving a used Nissan Versa, living on like $25K a year. Saved almost everything.
Retired young to focus on his math career.
And the key difference was his mindset, summed up in his statement, "I don't ever need to worry about money." He prioritized and achieved absolute control. We admire Urschel's outcome more, not because he necessarily ended up with more money than Walker earned, but because he was infinitely wealthier in independence.
The sources are really clear on this. Being rich without independence is just a special kind of poverty, maybe even an agonizing kind.
And this independence, it's not like a light switch on or off, it's a spectrum. Every dollar saved moves you a little further up that scale.
So for you listening, it's maybe helpful to think about specific, achievable levels of independence that bring the biggest psychological payoff.
Yeah, let's break down a few key milestones. Level 4, maybe. That's just having enough savings to handle typical life bumps. Car breaks down, unexpected medical bill, heating costs jump.
That buys you basic peace of mind. Reduces that background hum of anxiety.
Definitely. But the level that's truly life-changing, the one maybe most people should aim for first, that's level 7.
And level 7 is.
The ability to choose your work based on more than just salary, to avoid jobs with, as the source puts it, egregious examples of bullshit, and critically, the power to say no to a toxic boss or walk away from a terrible work environment without facing immediate financial ruin.
Level 7 is about retaining your dignity at work. That's huge.
It's massive. And then the ultimate goal, maybe level 15, that's waking up every single morning knowing, truly knowing, you can spend your day doing exactly what you want, when you want, with who you want. Full autonomy.
So the mental shift here is crucial. View every dollar you save not as a sacrifice of today's fun, but as an active purchase. You're buying independence, buying future peace, buying less stress.
That focus on autonomy then helps frame the big final challenge of managing money, the regret minimization framework.
Right, this constant tension between saving for the future, letting that compound interest work its magic, and living for today because, well, none of us know how much time we have.
It's a tough balance. The sources suggest the best compass here isn't live for today or save for tomorrow, but simply aim to minimize your future regret.
Jeff Bezos famously used this, didn't he, when deciding whether to start Amazon?
Exactly.
Yeah.
He mentally projected himself forward to age 80, and he thought, okay, will I regret trying this and failing? Probably not. But will I regret never having tried at all? Absolutely. That clarified the decision.
And we can apply that same regret minimization thinking to how we use our time, not just our money, thinking about compounding memories.
Ooh, I like that phrase. Compounding memories. Explain that.
Well, think about trading some potential income for more free time. Maybe taking a job that pays $50K but has you working 35 hours a week versus one that pays $60K but demands 45 hours.
Okay, so you're giving up $10K a year. Over a career, with compounding, that could easily be $1 million less in your retirement account. That's a big sacrifice.
It looked like a big sacrifice in pure dollar terms. But what do you gain? You gain back 10 hours a week. Over a 40-year career, that's roughly 15,000 hours.
15,000 hours of potential memories, time with family, hobbies, travel, rest, community work.
Exactly. Those memories, those experiences, they compound too in terms of life satisfaction. Decades from now, which asset will you value more, the extra million or the 15,000 hours of lived experience? You're choosing which form of compounding matters more to you.
That's a powerful frame. Okay, one last thing. Where should we focus our limited attention when it comes to spending? Because you can drive yourself crazy tracking every penny. Right, attention is finite. This is where the financial barbell idea comes in. You need to manage both ends.
Meaning?
It's almost impossible to build serious, lasting wealth if you don't get your biggest expenses under control. The huge ones. College debt, your house payment, your car loan. These are the decisions that can cost or save you hundreds of thousands, even millions over your lifetime.
Get the big rocks in place first.
But on the other end of the barbell, it's also really hard to grow wealth if you completely ignore the small stuff, if you don't care at all about the little expenses.
Because they add up. The latte factor thing.
Exactly. It's real. Like that story about John D. Rockefeller noticing that saving just one drop of solder used to seal each oil can would save the company hundreds of thousands over time. Small leaks sink big ships. Neglecting the small stuff entirely means you just bleed cash slowly.
But you have to be careful not to obsess over the small stuff either, right? Parkinson's law of triviality.
Precisely. That's the danger. Parkinson's law states that the amount of time and attention spent on an issue is inversely proportional to its actual importance.
So we spend an hour arguing about a $20 expense for the office party coffee, but approve a $10 million project with barely a glance.
Happens all the time. People agonize over a $3 latte or which brand of toothpaste is 50 cents cheaper while completely ignoring the massive impact of their mortgage rate, their student loan strategy, or the expensive car lease that's keeping them stuck financially for years.
So the key is strategic focus. Nail the big three. First, housing, transportation, education, debt. Then build smart, sustainable habits for the smaller stuff, but don't let the small stuff hijack all your mental energy. Keep your eye on the things that truly move the needle towards independence. Hashtag outro. Okay, so wrapping this all up. What does it really mean for you listening right now? If we pull together all these threads, the path towards what we're calling psychological wealth seems pretty clear.
Yeah, it boils down to a few core ideas, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Prioritize independence and actual usefulness over just chasing status. Understand that real lasting happiness comes more from contentment and contrast than from sheer quantity.
And always frame your decisions through that lens of minimizing future regret, balancing how you compound your money with how you compound your time and memories.
And maybe the most powerful, yet often overlooked, definition of wealth we discussed. It's not just what you have, it's the gap between what you have and what you want.
Right. And desiring less, that's the variable that's almost entirely within your control. It's a game you can actually win. Leads to that durable contentment, not just fleeting, expensive thrills.
Which brings us to a final, maybe challenging thought about identity. So many of us define ourselves by our financial situation or habits. I am a saver. I'm broke. I'm a big spender. I'm wealthy.
And the danger there is.
Anytime you lock your identity onto money like that, saying, I am a wall, you build this wall.
Yeah.
It makes it incredibly hard to change your mind, to adapt your behavior, even when circumstances change. Like the lifelong saver who struggles to actually spend money enjoyably in retirement, their identity gets in the way.
So maybe think about being a good ancestor, especially if you have kids. What will they truly remember and value about you?
It won't be the fancy car or the big house. It'll be your character, your presence, your support. The sources mention that kids from the happiest families, when saying goodbye, rarely thank parents just for providing. They thank them for believing in them.
That's the memory that compounds. That's the real legacy.
So the ultimate position to aim for, maybe, based on everything we've seen, it's being rich and anonymous.
Meaning, not necessarily a billionaire hiding on a yacht.
No, no. But achieving a level of financial security, that quiet compounding, that level 15 independence, that allows you to just be yourself, free from the need to impress anyone, free from the judgments and expectations of others.
That total control over your own time, your own choices, your own personality. That kind of freedom, that's truly priceless.
Focus on that control. Focus on that freedom. That feels like a really solid framework to take away and think about.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.